Hey, I'm still here, you guys. I know it's been a while. I've been working on the house. Lots of projects to do around here. Hi, Celeste. First things first, I would like to say thank you for Pierre Marie Robitaille for making that video debunking the debunker of Professor Dave Explains. I think it's good leadership to show that you can discuss very complex subject matter and do so in a professional light, and not resort to name calling and what have you. Don't stoop down to those types of people's levels, Pierre. I mean, they're not. It's not worth it. But if you do want to address a lot of their efforts and whatnot, in light of showing people how inquiry is done and how professional you can be, I think that's a good thing to do. Just sort of, just take a step back, For this paper, Dead Stars. Now, I am under the impression that the universe is essentially eternal. I don't believe that the universe has an age. Daniel Archer also wrote another stellar metamorphosis paper. I'll link that to the bottom. We got to look at things as being recycling in nature. The universe has always been the way it is. Not exactly the way it is, but the processes that we experience right now are constantly happening and have always been happening. The mentality of astronomers these days is, oh, well, there was a beginning and then everything exploded from that thing, which then made everything the way it is today. And it just sort of removes us removes us from reality and removes us from our ability to place importance on observations. Because nobody can observe the Big Bang, even from their standpoint. It's a very unscientific claim to claim something that we'll never observe or don't even have the ability to question. We're just supposed to accept it. And anything that comes around that we see, we have to attribute to that, which I don't think is good science at all. I actually think it's more along the lines of a religious practice. That being said, since the universe is essentially eternal, I want to discuss dead stars. I have a little paper here. In stellar metamorphosis, dead stars are made of rocks, minerals, and metal. Though just because a star is dead does not mean it is the same age as other dead stars. A good analogy would be a fossilized brontosaurus skull is vastly older than a fossilized mammoth skull, which in turn is magnitudes older than the people that were buried due to dying of the Black Plague from 1346 to 1353. And an actual plague, not just COVID-19 nonsense. There are different levels of being dead for a star: recently dead, mature, ancient, and archaic. A simple graph is used to explain the levels of dead. I have the graph here, different levels of being dead. The phase curves right up here, this would be a recently dead star. This would be a mature dead. This would be an ancient dead. This would be an archaic dead. And down here, I don't have a name for that. I guess it's just stuff that's gonna wander around until it's smashed up and recycled into a whole new star again. In terms of the time and the universe, there can be magnitudes of difference between objects that are both living, both young and old. There can be also higher magnitudes of time difference between dead objects, though, as known through the fossils of once living creatures on the earth. And I have some magnitudes of difference here. Of course, if you are interested in forensics and that type of stuff, it's important to understand the rate of decay for something that has recently died, because you can determine, oh, well, they died 5 minutes ago, they died 10 minutes ago, they died an hour ago, they died 3 hours ago, 8 hours ago, 48 hours ago, what have you. And those little 80 bits of time can be stretched out, and you can determine how old something dead is based off of different characteristics. And with astrophysics, I think that's where we need to be leaning towards more now that we have a better understanding of what these things actually are. The old, let's see what I have here. The recently dead objects, maybe like Mars, mature dead, and then you have ancient dead, which is like Venus, and then you have archaic dead, which would be like Mercury. And that being said, we should also start to look at these objects now that we've opened up the floodgates and have completely rejected Big Bang. We can have objects that are vastly older than 13.7 billion or 15 billion, what have you, years old. And it's very important to open up those floodgates because we need to have a more thorough understanding of nature and sort of move away from the creationist idealizations of the mathematicians that were alive in the early 1900s. And that's what this theory is mainly all about too. And one thing in particular we can use to date how old these objects are is crater counting. If we know what stage of evolution they're in, we can then say, well, okay, this is how old a object will be that's just recently dead and how many craters it should have versus the surface area versus a mature dead versus an ancient dead and then an archaic dead. And archaic dead objects would be like the far side of the moon. And if you look at all the craters that the far side of the moon have, it's just insane. I'm actually under the impression that the moon is even older than Mercury. I think the moon is probably quadrillions of years old. It's probably been around forever and ever and ever and ever. And you're seeing one of the oldest objects that we can visibly see with our own eyes in the galaxy, much less a lot of other galaxies. So to say the moon formed alongside the Earth, no way. Or to say the moon formed as a result of the Earth, of an impact event, no way. To say the Earth formed from some sort of core accretion process, no. The moon is the remains of a dead star that's vastly older than even Mercury. And that is saying a lot. When the scientists, when they take samples of the moon's surface and they say, well, the radiometric dating samples match the Earth, well, how do they know that for sure? Because if the radiometric dating samples match the Earth, how do they know that the Earth wasn't something much more majestic in its past too? And a lot of the Earth's material was bleeding directly onto the moon and making lava lakes. And those lava lakes on the moon, when the Earth was destroying the moon, were mixed in with the surface material, making their radioisotope abundances match for the most part. So what we have here is a very different worldview as well. It's really important to understand that dead objects in the galaxy and of the universe as a whole can tell a lot deeper, richer history than what they were previously afforded. And that also ties in with gyrochronology, meaning how fast something spins and how much energy something spins with. And the archaic dead objects will obviously all be either tidally locked or barely spinning at all. Ancient dead objects such as Venus, barely spinning at all. I think I went over that in another talk. And that's to be expected when the object has just been around for so long, it just stops spinning. I mean, the orbital rate of Venus around the sun is almost the same rate as its actual spin, the rate at which it spins. So it's kind of crazy. And the astronomers, they have no explanation for that because they try to force all the solar system objects to be the same age and have the same histories. But now that we've opened up the floodgates and we have dead objects all over the galaxy and they're all many magnitudes, different ages from each other, then we can have a more holistic view of events. The crater counting, how many craters can be, or how many, there's a lot of crater counting that I can't remember, but basically it opens the floodgates for the crater counting too, because if an object has a lot of craters like the far side of the moon and the near side has previous lava lakes on it, that just shows you that that object was orbiting really close to the Earth when the Earth was a hot young star. It was blasting the front face of it off, and the back face was getting all these asteroids hitting it because it was orbiting really, really close to the Earth when the Earth was very, very hot and big. And that tells us a lot of the moon's history. The moon's been around the Earth for a very long time. Also, carrier countering can be applied to objects that are still gaseous and very, very young, like Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus. Even though they're old by our standards, they're very young in terms of the stellar world. Earth is still a kind of intermediate age in regards to the stellar world. Anyways, I just want to talk to some new people about that to let them know what's going on. Again, thank you, Pierre Marie Robitaille, for making that debunking of the debunker video. It's very entertaining to some extent, but definitely keep on the line of being more professional than those types of people that you see online, because it's unacceptable behavior to be that nasty to somebody when you don't even really know them. All right, there you go.